a tragedy that would leave an indelible mark on the nation.
So it was definitely someone that
they know.
Yeah.
Lifeless bodies of their 4 children piled on top of one another. Mr. Tan and Madam Lee received a Chinese New Year card and it wrote, "Now you can have no more offspring. Ha ha ha." It serves as a grim reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human cruelty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Mysteries of Asia. Tonight we are delving into one of the most harrowing and unsolved cases in Singapore. I'm sure many of you, if you're Singaporean or perhaps even Malaysian, have heard of this case, and it is the Geylang Bahru murders. Now this case remains unsolved till this day, and it is a very tragic and harrowing case. Let's dive into it. The Geylang Bahru murders, a tragedy that would leave an indelible mark on the nation, where 4 innocent children were brutally slashed to death in their home, and to this day, the crime remains unsolved. On January 6, 1979, a typical Saturday morning in the quiet neighbourhood of Geylang Bahru, the Tan family lived in a modest HDB flat at Block 58. Mr. Tan Kwin Chai and Madam Lee Mei Ying ran a minibus business, transporting children to and from schools in the neighbourhood. So just your typical Singaporean family living in a modest HDB flat. The family had 4 children: 10-year-old Tan Kok Peng, 8-year-old Tan Kok Hin, 6-year-old Tan Kok Soon, and 5-year-old Tan Chin Ni. These are the children here, and they are in their graduation gown. Oh my gosh, look at that. All below the age of 12, the oldest being 10, youngest being 5-year-old. The 3 boys attended Bendemeer Road Primary School, while their sister went to the People's Association Kindergarten. The discovery. So how was the crime discovered? On the morning of January 6, 1979, Mr. Tan and Madam Lee left for work at 6:35 a.m. after kissing their sleeping children goodbye. At around 7:10 a.m., around 40 minutes later, Madam Lee called home to wake the kids, as was her daily routine. However, no one answered, and obviously she was feeling uneasy about this because your children aren't answering your phone calls. So she asked a neighbour to check on her children. The neighbour knocked on the door at around 8 a.m. but received no response still. So they assumed that the kids might have woken up, gotten ready, and left for school. Returning home at 10 a.m., Mr. Tan, the husband, and Madam Lee, the wife, were met with a horrifying sight. Entering their flat, they discovered the lifeless bodies of their 4 children piled on top of one another in the bathroom, clad only in their underwear and shirts, each with multiple slash wounds, piled on top of one another. That's just a very morbid visual. It feels like they were just products or like just things to throw and piled up on top of each other. The youngest child, Chin Ni, had multiple facial wounds and was stacked right at the top. The eldest, Kok Peng, had an almost severed right arm, which suggested that he actually put on a fight. Perhaps he used his arm to block the attacker and he fought back. That's why his arm was almost severed. But more details on that later. The children had approximately 20 slash wounds each, and blood was splattered across the bathroom floor. 20 slash wounds. I mean, from like crime stories and articles I've read, usually when there's so many slash wounds or like stabbing wounds, it indicates a personal attack. If the intention was just to kill, just a few stabs or slashes would suffice, but 20 slashes, I'm just thinking it's probably a personal attack. According to the death investigation report, the siblings' time of death was estimated to be between 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. But according to neighbours, nobody heard anything from the unit. If it was such a massacre, surely the children would be screaming, or at least there would be some sounds.
Or maybe they did it like one by one.
Perhaps when the kids were sleeping, they were murdered. That's why there were no sounds. The crime scene. When the police arrived, it was concluded that the murders were premeditated and that the perpetrator or perpetrators had taken care to avoid leaving incriminating evidence behind. Because the unit was rather clean for such a massacre, like 4 people dead, surely the house would be a bloodbath. They found no signs of forced entry or robbery. The flat was undisturbed, suggesting the crime was not financially motivated. Nothing was stolen, they weren't robbed. The murder weapons believed to be a chopper taken from the kitchen of the flat. Investigators deduced that the eldest son, Kok Ping, put up a fight as several strands of long hair were found in his hand. The brutality and precision of the attack suggested a calculated act of vengeance. It's such a waste that Kok Ping actually had evidence from the killer, but unfortunately, because it was quite an old case and it happened way back then, technology wasn't as advanced and they weren't able to test the DNA. I'm just thinking, didn't they keep the hair? Like, don't they keep evidence? Do the police discard evidence? Like, if they kept the hair, they could test it now and they could finally find the killer.
I think it was reported as well that the hair back then, they kind of thought that it might be the kid's own hair.
Kid's own hair.
But why would he pull his own hair? Most probably would have pulled the killer's hair instead.
Yeah, and if there was a fight, you know, they could find DNA under the fingernails of the kids. Like maybe the kids scratched their attackers or whatever, but unfortunately it was too old a case and technology wasn't as advanced yet, unfortunately. The investigation. The police believe that there were likely two perpetrators involved, given the lack of noise reported by neighbors and the organized nature of the crime. Blood traces in the kitchen and the absence of stains in the living room indicated a cleanup, reinforcing the theory of a premeditated attack. The killers seemed familiar with the Tan family's routine, committing the murders between 6:35 a.m. and 7:10 a.m. So the time frame is actually quite tight. They only had just a couple of hours, maybe 2-3 hours to commit the crime because the parents left at around 6:35 a.m. and the dad came home at 10 a.m. So the killers obviously knew what they were doing. Despite extensive investigations and over 100 interviews, the case remains unsolved. There was a witness that claimed to have seen a bloodied couple outside the flat, but this statement was later debunked as a hoax. Who the hell would play punk like that? Who the hell would lie like that? What a fucker, what an asshole. Why would you say that?
I think it's quite common. Usually when big cases,
they just want attention from it, but that's so fucked up, man. People are grieving such a horrifying experience and you want to raise their hopes up for nothing. Fuck you, man. Whoever played this hoax, fuck you. There was also a neighbor, a old granny, Yam Yip Tin, 68, who usually sits outside her flat along the common passageway to watch the residents' children play. But coincidentally, on that morning, she was washing her hair. She didn't see anyone in the corridor because she just wasn't there, washing her hair. Coincidence? We'll find out later. It's just a little bit sus that just nice, on that day of the killing, the granny wasn't sitting at the corridor. Like, what's up with this granny, man? Did the granny kill them? That's very sus. Sushii! Stop! Sorry, some technical difficulties. I think secretary is always angsty. She's always angsty during episodes of Mysteries of Asia. Another very interesting lead emerged from a taxi driver from Toa Payoh. He came forward informing investigators that he had picked up a man in his 20s who walked with a stagger. The man boarded his taxi near Block 96 along Kalang Baru Road, near the location of the murder at around 8 a.m. The taxi driver said that the man had blood stains on the left side of his body and carried a knife that banged against the taxi door when he alighted at Lavender Street. The man was later identified as just Uncle, a Malaysian and neighbor of the Tan family. It is known that he would visit the family every other day to borrow the phone and call back to his Malaysian home. So I guess this uncle is the most prominent suspect thus far, but the story deepens. The man was arrested and they even conducted a police lineup. The taxi driver was able to immediately identify him as the same man who boarded his taxi. However, Uncle was released by the police 2 weeks after his arrest due to a lack of evidence. Released 2 weeks later, so close yet so far. I guess it's very hard to confirm that he's the killer, but I mean, to just release him like that. Yeah, but I guess it just shows how difficult it is to process a crime or to catch a killer way back then, when, you know, technology isn't as advanced and there aren't as many CCTVs as there are in Singapore right now. I don't know if that's a good thing to have so many CCTVs in Singapore, but I guess it helps with cases and crimes like this. Uncle later moved out of Block 58 with his sister. Is that suspicious? Or was he just being low-key? Or maybe he just didn't want anything to do with the crime anymore, so he just moved out of the block. This is probably the most sickening detail of this murder. 2 weeks after the murder, Mr. Tan and Madam Lee received a Chinese New Year card which depicted children playing together. The couple was addressed by their nicknames Ah Chai and Ah Eng, and it wrote, "Now you can have no more offspring, ha ha ha," in Mandarin Chinese. Now that's just fucking sickening, man. Like, now it is confirmed that it is a personal attack.
the uncle guy, he was caught for 2 weeks, right? After he was released, they received the card. I mean, we don't know the exact timeline, but 2 weeks after,
just nice, the card
just nice,
came.
and then the card came.
The message in the card referred to the sterilization that Madam Lee had undergone after the birth of their youngest child, Chin Ni, 5 years ago. Oh my gosh, so Madam Lee is even sterilized? Oh, that's why she can have no more offspring. I guess the murderer knew that Madam Lee underwent a sterilization operation so that she couldn't have any more offspring. Oh, that is just so sickening. So it was a well-kept secret that only the relatives and close friends of Tan's family knew about this sterilization. Wow, imagine the amount of distrust you have at Chinese New Year gathering, because only close friends or relatives knew about this sterilization.
So it was definitely someone that they know.
Yeah. Wow. The card was signed off as the murderer. So the wow. That's so fucked up. Damn. Due to the lack of advanced forensic technology in Singapore in the 1970s, the fingerprint on the card could not be tested and traced back to the perpetrator. If this were to happen in today's time in Singapore, the killers would immediately get caught. Sure one. And now we move on to the theories. So there are several theories that circulated regarding the motive behind the murders, all of which Mr. Tan and Madam Lee denied. Theory 1. Affair and revenge. Madam Lee had an alleged affair with uncle, and when she refused to leave her family, he killed the children out of spite. Now this is just an allegation. I'm not saying for sure that Madam Lee had an affair. It is just a theory, and out of jealousy and her refusing to leave her family behind, uncle killed the children. And I guess it's quite a common motive for killers to commit crimes out of love and revenge, because love is a very potent and strong catalyst for murder. Theory 2. Madam Lee's brother claimed that the couple had participated in an illicit tontine scheme in which members paid into a shared account and received profits, and the last survivor would get everything. So yeah, when I first heard about this, I was, what the fuck is a tontine scheme? It sounds fucking ridiculous. So a tontine scheme is a system of mutual life insurance. Basically, investors or participants will contribute a lump sum upfront and receive dividend payments in proportion to their contribution. Over time, as the participants or investors die, when there is only one participant left, they receive the entirety of the dividend. Yeah, when I first heard about this, I'm like, what the fuck? I've never heard of this before. It sounds like you're betting on your life. Like, who would live longer? I'm gonna bet. If I think I'm gonna live longer, I will get all the money. It sounds extremely ridiculous. But if this is true, shouldn't the killers attack the parents instead of the children? Because the parents are probably the one in this tontine or tontine scheme. Also, it doesn't explain the Chinese New Year greeting card. Theory 3. This theory is a interesting theory, and this theory surfaced when YouTuber Kaylee Elise covered the story back in 2017. Even though the video is no longer available, this is a screenshot of the highest rated comment by a person called Days, where he or she claims to know the real story. So this is the comment. You can pause the video here to read the comment. This commenter claims to know the real story. However, we should take this as a pinch of salt, because after all, it is just a random comment from the internet. So this commenter claims that everyone in the area knows that it was their uncle who murdered the kids, or the uncle character. Their parents were supposed to help buy 4D for that uncle, but when the uncle came to pick up his winnings, the parents told him that they had forgotten to buy it. The prize money was between $40,000 to $50,000. So naturally, the uncle got really angry and he didn't believe the Tan family. Furthermore, the parents bought a mini school bus for their business shortly after, so this further infuriated the uncle. Like, obviously he doesn't believe that the Tan family didn't buy the 4D number. If not, why would they be able to buy a mini bus shortly after? So he murdered the kids as a revenge to end their bloodline out of money, which is so ridiculous. The reason as to why Mr. and Mrs. Tan did not report uncle to the police is because they were involved in drug activities, and the uncle is in a street gang. So if the parents were to report him, they were afraid that uncle would rat them out. And because drug activity in Singapore carries a death sentence, the Tan family was even more apprehensive of reporting uncle to the police, if this theory is true. Also, no neighbors would report uncle as well because they were afraid of being a target of uncle's street gang, which would explain why grandma, the granny we mentioned earlier, was coincidentally washing her hair during the time of the crime. This theory suggests that perhaps the grandma was afraid of uncle, so she denied having witnessed anything related to the crime out of fear. Also, if you read the comment, like the last few sentences, some neighbors also claim to see ghostly kids running around in the apartment when they look into it from the kitchen window. That's a bit spooky. But this block has now been demolished. If not, I would actually visit this apartment.
I think one of the documentaries that reported on this case went to interview some of the old neighbors of the block, and then there were a family of Malay, mother and kids. I think back then the kids were very young. It was mentioned that the day before it happened, the kids were crying a lot. That's why the parents brought the kids and they went over to their grandparents' house to stay over instead of their own house. So on the day when the murder happened, right, they were not home. So that was like kind of interesting. The thing is, you never know. Like, it could be the kids sent something the night before.
So many things are lining up.
That like just nice.
Just nice.
The ama was like washing her hair. How can it be that nobody heard anything? Maybe somehow stars really do align for the killer.
This is the aftermath of the crime. The 4 children were buried on January 7, 1979 at Choa Chu Kang Cemetery in their best clothes and their school bags, books and toys. It was reported that Madam Lee had fainted many times as her children were put in their respective burial spots. Obviously, I mean, a mother watching 4 of her young children being buried, that's sure to scar a mother mentally. In the article clipping, you can see Madam Chan, 66, their grandmother, carrying toys and school bags which were buried together with the children as well. After that, their parents sold their minibus firm and went to work for a company that made PVC materials. However, there was I guess a small silver lining, because in December 1983, Madam Lee, the wife, successfully reversed her sterilization and gave birth to a healthy baby boy followed by a daughter. That's one small slither of good news, that Madam Lee is still able to have offsprings. All the theories are quite possible. Like, it sounds like it could happen. The Tontine scheme, the lover one, I think there's so many things that we don't know about this case. Like, so many factors could be involved. Like, did the wife really have an affair with the uncle? If she did, that's a very strong motivator for a murder. The Tontine scheme also, like, money is also a very common thing that is a catalyst for a murder also.
Because there were 2 women being interviewed as well when this case was being investigated, the hair that was pulled out, it was said that it was a long hair also. So it could be one of those women. And also because it was 2 women that was being arrested and questioned, right? There's no sound. It means that they were probably brought in one by one. So one person maybe was like entertaining the kids outside to get them to keep quiet, while another is like committing the act.
It's quite unbelievable that only one person can do it. Like 4 kids is quite a bit to handle, you know?
Yeah, that's why the kids could have just ran out or like
escape.
Get help or something. But like, also it's very sad because the youngest one is probably the last one, so seeing her brothers all dead.
Because she was stacked last.
Yeah, she's right at the top. In the end, they also released these 2 women.
The most interesting theory is number 3 lah. I think also because it's just a random comment on the internet, like, oh my god, like, who's this person? It's like, wow, one person knows what happened. Yeah, but again, it's just a random comment on the internet. Most recently in April 2021, so just 3 years ago, a local community group, Crime Library Singapore, CLS, revisited the case and unearthed new information. And these are the new information. The scene of the crime is at level 5 and not level 4, as reported by the 1979 news articles. Lee Mei Ying, the wife, her true name is Lee MC and she is not locally born. Neighbors of the Tan family held crucial information not revealed to the police. And this is the post by CLS. You guys can pause it here if you want to read it. While the new information provided by CLS could not be verified, it has definitely rekindled hopes of solving the crime 42 years later. It was also reported that Madam Lee, now 73 years old, was tearful upon hearing that investigations were being resumed. Sadly, Mr. Tan, the husband, passed away, but Madam Lee shared that her husband would have shared the same sentiments and wishes for justice for their children. So if you guys really do have any new information, you can call the CLS hotline. I'll put it here. It's 629-352-50. The Geylang Bahru family murders is arguably the biggest, if not one of the biggest crimes that happened in Singapore. It serves as a grim reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human cruelty. And despite advancements in forensic science and investigative techniques, some cases like this one remains unsolved, leaving behind questions that may never be answered. But I hope one day that Madam Lee and the Tan family can have closure and the killers will finally be found. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing. And yeah, again, if any of you have any new information, you can call the hotline. And yeah, very interesting case. I'm glad that I finally dived deep into this case, because I've heard of this case, but I've never really dived deep into the details. And I'm surprised by the details in this case. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. See you guys next week. Bye.